I'm going to start just by saying welcome to all of you, and thank you all for joining this Town Hall event for the Early Career Research Fellowships in Cultural and Heritage Institutions. This is a funding opportunity offered by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. We're going to be here for the next hour and a half to give you some information about the scheme, an opportunity to hear from some of the organisations who are involved, and to ask questions that come up immediately. I'm going to share my screen just for a brief couple of introductory slides, and I should have started by introducing myself, so apologies for not doing that immediately. My name is Joanna Norman. I'm Director of Research, the Library and the Archives at the V&A, and I am chairing this session today because I am the lead for the training and development team, cohort training and development team for this fellowship programme based at the V&A. Joining me today and the people that you will be hearing from, Eloise Rowley, who is our amazing project coordinator. Thanks, Eloise, who works at the V&A with us on coordinating the scheme. Andrea Bond, Senior Investment Manager in Skills at the Arts and Humanities Research Council, who will be presenting the funding opportunity. We have one of our amazing current cohort of fellows, Sean Parkinson from Royal Botanic Gardens, Edinburgh. And then we have some colleagues from the individual independent research organisations who are participating in this scheme. So you will hear from colleagues from Historic England, Historic Environment Scotland, Imperial War Museums, the Natural History Museum and Royal Museums Greenwich. We are organising another 3 events at which other independent research organisations will be speaking. So this is the chance to hear from these particular 5. Programme for the session, as I say, we will be going for about an hour and a half. We'll be finishing at 5 o'clock. There will be a short break, just a comfort break of 5 minutes at around 4:25. Before the break, the order of play is that I will hand over to Andrea to present the opportunity from AHRC's perspective. I will then talk briefly about our role from the V&A, the cohort coordination and development aspects, and a little bit about the application process. We will then hear from 3 independent research organisations about their priorities for this opportunity, a short Q&A then, short break. Then we'll hear from our current fellow, Sean, about his experiences of being part of this pilot, the pilot programme of fellows. We'll hear from the final 2 IROs today, and then we'll have a wrap-up Q&A. So that's the order of this this event. Eloise, do you want to just run through the housekeeping?
Sure. So just to put a few points on housekeeping to bear in mind, as Jo mentioned, we are recording this town hall and a recording will be available on the funding page shortly afterwards. To limit background noise, we're asking please can you remain on mute unless you're going to ask a question. We've got a really tight schedule today, so please only ask questions during the allotted Q&A sections or pop them in the chat if you have something that you really need to write down. All today's presentations will be available on the funding call as well soon after the event. And finally, after today's town hall, I'm going to be sharing a link to a voluntary equality, diversity and inclusion monitoring form. It's completely anonymous and the data will only be used by the V&A for the programme evaluation. Thanks.
Thanks, Eloise. So I think that is enough of an introduction. So I am going to hand over straight to Andrea Bond from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Andrea.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Jo. Yes, as Jo's mentioned, I work in the AHRC Skills team. I'm the Senior Investment Manager for the Collaborative Doctoral Partnership Scheme and also the Collaborative Landscape Awards and now looking after the Early Career Fellowships. Just going to start my slideshow. So we're really excited to launch the second round of our early career fellowships and cultural and heritage institutions. The scheme is designed to support early career researchers working within the UK's vibrant culture and heritage sectors, and it's building on the success of the pilot round. The scheme offers individual fellowships hosted by independent research organisations, enabling talented researchers to deepen their expertise and contribute to the sector's knowledge base. And additionally, a cohort-based programme of networking events and career development activities, fostering collaboration, peer support and long-term professional growth. So our aim through this scheme is to strengthen research capacity within independent research organisations, to support career progression for early career researchers and foster a vibrant, connected community of cultural and heritage research professionals. The scheme reflects our commitment to nurturing talent, promoting innovation and ensuring long-term sustainability of research in the cultural and heritage sector. So for us, this scheme is first and foremost people focused, which is why we have chosen the image of seedlings growing. It symbolises growth, care and potential. And at its heart, the fellowship is about nurturing early career postdoctoral researchers, giving them the space, support and opportunity to develop professionally within the UK's rich cultural and heritage landscape. The key objectives for the fellows are to create meaningful opportunities for early career postdoctoral researchers to build, deepen or broaden their experience of working in and with major cultural and heritage organisations, and to develop their skills and future research careers in ways that align with the work, collections and practices of their host organisations. Through this, we aim to support not just individual career progressions, but also the wider research capacity and sustainability of the sector. As you can see on this slide, for hosts themselves, we hope that the fellowship will deliver high quality and impactful research while enhancing the host capacity in areas which are closely aligned with their research strategy and will lead to practical benefits and outcomes. So the objectives for the scheme for the wider sector, so we hope the fellowships will bring meaningful benefits to the wider cultural and heritage sector, firstly by addressing a well-recognised need for more dedicated support at the early stages of research careers, something AHRC is committed to supporting. Secondly, by promoting equality, diversity and inclusion principles and helping to build and diversify the sector's research capabilities. And then finally, by supporting broader societal engagement, strengthening the cultural and heritage sector's contribution to culture, society and the economy. So now moving on to sort of the practical side, so the eligibility requirements for fellows. So candidates must be based in the UK or eligible to work here, for example, through a visa. Show a clear commitment to working with the culture and heritage sector. This will be important when hosts consider supporting your application. Either already being employed or have confirmed offer of employment from the host for the duration of the fellowship, particularly relevant to the full proposal stage. Be of postdoctoral standing, so I'll explain what this means on the next slide. And then finally, each applicant must address one predefined research area from a host IRO and submit one expression of interest as specified in the funding opportunity. So this is just to note that fellowships could use methodologies, theories, approaches and tools from any discipline or a combination of disciplines if it's an interdisciplinary project, as long as the scope of the project and the overall approach are within the AHRC's remit. If you're uncertain about the AHRC's remit, details of that can be found within our research funding guide. There's a link on the slide, particularly pages 89 through to 95. And then if you or the host have any doubts whether your project includes a sufficient element of arts and humanities to be funded by AHRC, you can submit a pre-application remit query through our website. In terms of the postdoctoral criteria, to qualify as being of postdoctoral standing, candidates must meet one of these criteria at the time of application. So self-identify as an early career researcher working in the arts and humanities research space in accordance with the AHRC's guidance on training and developing early career researchers in the arts and humanities. So there is a link on our website on the funding opportunity page for that. It's important to note that AHRC defines early career research status based on funding history, so not your job title or years since PhD. Alternatively, you may qualify if you have up to 6 years of postdoctoral research experience or up to 6 years in roles where research was a major component. So just a quick note on eligibility for those finishing their PhDs. If a doctoral candidate has passed their viva before the expression of interest application deadline and only needs to make minor corrections, they are eligible to apply. However, if the corrections are substantial and require reassessment, they won't meet the eligibility criteria. And if they've not had their viva assessed by the 10th of December deadline, unfortunately, that would mean they aren't eligible. When considering eligibility timelines, please note that any career breaks, for example, due to family care, health reasons, or the COVID-19 pandemic, such as homeschooling or furlough, these can be excluded from the calculation. So moving on to the eligibility for hosts. So the hosts need to be an independent research organisation that are eligible to receive UKRI and AHRC funding. And they can check this by taking a look at the UKI list of IROs on our website. And they must be able to conduct research within the AHRC remit that is in the areas suitable for arts and humanities research. Each host must provide a supportive research environment for the fellow. So just to unpack that a bit, it should include things like line management, a strong commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion, access to mentoring, relevant training, collections and facilities, and overall support for the fellow's career development. Hosts must also commit to employing the fellow for the full duration of the award. And then finally, we strongly encourage hosts to follow the principles of the Concordat to support the career development of researchers to ensure fellows are well supported throughout their journey. So moving on to partnerships and collaborative opportunities, we encourage partnerships that enhance the fellowship's experience through skills training and research collaboration, and have therefore provided the option for host organisations to co-host a fellow, provided one host takes the lead on the employment and managing the fellowship. This allows for flexibility arrangements that can benefit the fellow and the institutions involved. So applications involving multiple host organisations are welcome, and if this applies, one must lead the employment, like I've said before, managing the award. The application must clearly specify the activities at each host, and it should explain how the arrangement benefits both the hosts and the fellow's career development. And then all hosts involved must be listed in the application. Additionally, host organisations may also choose to partner with other UK cultural and heritage organisations, universities or international organisations. These partners do not need to have IRO status, and partnerships are optional. For example, non-IROs may wish to consider collaborating with an IRO host to offer placement opportunities. So this type of activity would enable the fellow to spend part of the fellowship within the organisation. So, for example, to work on a specific collection, or other projects. Costs incurred through placements can be included as part of the funding application. So when I talk about the funding application, I actually mean the full proposal stage. If a partnership is included, a letter of support must be submitted, and this should outline the purpose, commitment and added value of the collaboration. As Jo will give you a bit more detail, fellowships will include a dedicated training and development programme designed specifically for the cohort of fellows participating within this scheme. It builds on the successful model delivered during the pilot phase by the cohort coordination and development team at the VNA. And the programme will include sector-specific skills training, panel discussions, networking activities to foster peer learning and cohort identity. And it has been designed to support career development, inclusive participation and engagement, both within and beyond the cohort. My understanding is most of the activities will be delivered online, with some in-person events, including a residential. And more importantly of all, fellows are expected to engage with the programme and with activities averaging at about half a day per week. Further details on the current programme is available on the VNA's Early Career Research Fellowship page. So moving on to durations and timings. I'll run through the dates and then explain exactly how to apply on one of the next slides. So fellowships can last between 1 and 2 years, longer if part-time. The expression of interest stage is currently open and due to close on the 10th of December 2025. So we hope that this is a generous amount of time for potential fellows to discuss their ideas with potential hosts prior to submitting an expression of interest form. The V&A will provide you with further details on the requirements and the timings of the expression of interest stage, as they will be leading on this. The timeline for the full proposal stage will be published when the funding opportunity timeline has been finalised. This is expected to be either at the end of this year or early next year. And then just to say, following the full proposal stage, we expect all fellowships to begin on the 1st of January 2027, unless there are exceptional circumstances that apply, for example, on EDI grounds. As we're talking about EDI, we strongly encourage applications from individuals who are underrepresented in the cultural and heritage research sector. This includes ethnic minorities and disabled people, though this is not an exhaustive list. And throughout the process, applicants may choose to disclose personal characteristics. However, disclosure is entirely optional. And further details on how equality, diversity and inclusion are being considered in the expression of interest phase can be found in the Equality Impact Assessment published on the UKRI Funding Finder. Okay, so the important bit, how to apply. Firstly, each candidate is advised to read the Funding Finder text in detail to check eligibility and ensure they have a clear understanding of all the requirements. Secondly, it's important to note we have a list of the areas of interest provided by participating IROs, and I would advise that you read this document and consider which of those areas are resonating with you and your background, and then approach any relevant IRO to discuss further. In addition to that, we've also provided a list of relevant contact details for each IRO on the funding opportunity page. Just to note, you can approach multiple IROs to discuss potential fellowships, but you can only submit one expression of interest form to the scheme. So, you know, it's really important that you have a good look at the IRO areas of interest to see what may appeal to you. And just to note, you will find all the additional documents referenced in this presentation under the additional information section on the Funding Finder opportunity page. For me, that's all of the key aspects of the expression of interest stage to share with you in the scheme overall. So thank you for listening. I'm going to hand back over to Jo.
Andrea, thank you very much. Everybody, if you have questions for Andrea, please do save them up or type them in the chat, and we will come to them at the end of this half of the session. So I am now just going to pick up from Andrea and talk a little more about the cohort coordination and development aspects of the programme. So the first thing to say is that we are a team of 3 based at the V&A at the moment. So I lead the team with Eloise, who you've already met, and our colleague Ollie Cox, who is Head of Academic Partnerships. So the 3 of us are based at the V&A, but working very closely with Arts and Humanities Research Council colleagues, with the different host independent research organisations, and with the cohort of fellows. And our work is really in 3 main areas, and I'm going to talk about the first 2 of these, but not the third. So the first one is supporting the development of fellowship proposals through the expression of interest phase, and the second is the design and delivery of a programme of cohort training and development. So what do we mean by the cohort training and development programme? This is a programme that we have with input, obviously, from colleagues, from fellows, and really from a baseline understanding of gaps within the sector, have designed specifically for this cohort. It's aimed to support the early career research fellows doing this programme in how to become or how to deepen their experience of being researchers embedded within cultural and heritage organisations. As Andrea said, the time commitment of this part of the fellowship is approximately half a day a week, with most sessions taking place online. There are, as she mentioned, some key milestone events that will take place in person, and we would expect that there will be at least one residential. The exact timing of those events and their location will be decided according to the overall timescale of the programme, and also the location of where the fellows are based. So all of that is very much worked out on a once we know who the fellows are and which organisations they're based in. Alongside the more structured elements of the programme that I'll talk about in a second, mentoring is also a part of it that we support with. And there's a really important element which Sean may touch on when he speaks, which is about peer-to-peer learning. So just to give some examples of training and development that we have run as part of the pilot programme, and they've fallen really into three main areas. So we've organised a series of seminars that are really focused on specific issues within the cultural and heritage sector, and specifically to do with researchers, research and being a researcher within the cultural and heritage sector. So we've worked with many colleagues from different kinds of organisations who have focused on particular current themes, challenges and opportunities that in which we are all working as in the research landscape. The second strand is workshops, so really practical workshops, either online or in person. Some of those topics have been around navigating complex institutions. As a researcher, how do you build your contacts? How do you get to know a particularly complicated institution with many different stakeholders, many different experts working in different fields? And then a second workshop we ran was on working with communities. Again, very much about kind of how to build that kind of research practice or how to deepen it. And then we've run quite a lot of practical sessions on different aspects, both of the fellowship itself, but also thinking about future career pathways. So we've done surgery sessions on budget management, project management. We have done some really practical sessions around career pathways, writing CVs, how to write a really good CV, about future funding opportunities and what makes a really good grant application. So we're trying to make it a programme that is practical, but is also particularly for those coming into the sector without prior experience of it, to really give you a strong sense, give fellows a strong sense of what it means to be working in a research capacity in this kind of organisation, and for those who know it already to deepen that experience. I mentioned mentoring. We have run 2 sessions on what it means to be a mentor, what it means to be mentored, and then we have worked with fellows to broker mentoring relationships for them, so relationships between a fellow and an external mentor. We have run a responsive grant scheme to supplement the fellows' research and their projects. And then we've really responded to the cohort of fellows within this pilot programme to try and support them in developing their own peer-to-peer learning. And that, I think, has been a really positive and constructive part of how this fellowship programme has worked in its pilot phase. There have been, we should probably say, there have been 8 fellows funded in the pilot phase, based in 7 different organisations, because Royal Botanic Gardens Kew has hosted 2 fellows. And so they've all been undertaking an independent research project, but hosted within their particular organisation. As Andrea said, and I've put the link again here, you can find out more about the programme, all aspects of the programme, but including the training and development aspects at our V&A research page. And I particularly wanted to highlight the project outputs that you'll see. I've just given you a screenshot here. Some of those are blog posts which relate to some of the training and development sessions that we've run. So you might want to have a read through of those to see some of the topics that have been covered. Andrea has spoken about developing the fellowship application, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of specific things on this. as she says, all the information is available on the funding finder page, and that information will be updated as we go through these town halls. You can go to that page and find out which independent research organisations are participating in the programme. There are 23. Read about the priority areas of interest that each organisation has identified and find out how to get in touch with a potential host. So you'll see on that funding finder page that there are common areas that have been articulated, and I'm just summarising them here. So they're quite broad, deliberately so, because they're things that we share across our different organisations. So research into underexplored collections and places that might unlock opportunities for more inclusive engagement with heritage, research that contextualises collections and heritage in relation to contemporary themes of national and global relevance, creative technologies as applies to practice and performance, applications of heritage science to better understand and conserve collections, sites, materials and environments, how cultural heritage can address and engage with climate change and biodiversity loss, sustainability and resilience, and then enhancing and exploring future practices in cultural heritage and creative organisations. And that covers quite a wide range of areas. It's a lot to take in, I recognise, so do read through these, the text that's on the funding finder or that I've captured here on the slides. From the funding finder, you will, under additional information, you will find a spreadsheet. And again, I'm showing you a screenshot here that goes into more detail about each organisation and what they are looking for. Please do read that and use it as the basis of your discussions, because these are the areas that your potential hosts are really interested in. And so those are the areas where they are likely to take forward fellowship applications. To contact a potential host, there is a document which again is on the funding finder under additional information. It gives a contact name and email address for each organisation. Please don't leave it too late. Every organisation will be having concurrent conversations with potential fellows. They will be doing that alongside other things. So please do try and get in touch as early as reasonably possible. And that will enable them to respond and to give you some feedback on whether your idea will fit with their own priorities. As I say, we are organising another 3 town hall events at which different independent research organisations will be speaking. These are the details. Again, they're on the funding finder. So if you would like to sign up for another one, feel free to do so. There's nothing to stop you coming to all of them. And just as a timeline reminder, we are now in the phase of candidates being able to approach potential hosts to discuss ideas for a fellowship. This phase runs until the 10th of December, and the deadline for submitting an expression of interest is 4 o'clock on the 10th of December. The form for the expression of interest is downloadable from the funding finder, and it should be sent to Eloise, and I've given her email address here. It's also on the funding finder page, so that we will be collating everything to pass on to the different independent research organisations. So that is enough for me. We are going to pass on to hear from 3 of the IROs that are participating. So you are going to hear from, in this order, so Historic England, Thomas Gould, Historic Environment Scotland, Ben Thomas, and then Imperial War Museums, Maria Castrillo. So I will now hand over to Thomas to speak for Historic England.
Great, thank you, Jo. I'll just share my slides. Okay, yeah, as Jo says, my name's Tom Gould. I'm the Research Partnerships Manager at Historic England. Historic England is the public body whose role it is to conserve and to champion England's historic environment. So we advise government on heritage policy and planning. We designate and protect important sites and buildings. We carry out research into archaeology, architecture, and historic places. And we promote public understanding of heritage through education, publications, and resources. We have announced 2 broad research priorities for the Early Career Fellowship opportunity. I just want to precede this with a caveat that I am personally not an expert in either of these themes, but I am coordinating any queries we receive from prospective fellows. So if you do have any specialised questions, do feel free to drop me an email. You can find my contact details on the funding finder, and I'll be more than happy to coordinate a response to you. Okay, the first of those themes is climate change and adaptation. Climate change is, of course, a core research priority at Historic England, and we're seeking proposals that fall under one of the following headings: risk, adaptation and hazards, embodied carbon and whole life carbon, and climate resilience and nature-based solutions. I'll just talk through some indicative subtopics. So, for example, heritage-led climate justice. So proposals could investigate how climate adaptation and mitigation strategies can account for social equity and inclusion within heritage contexts. For example, the impact on marginalized communities. Adaptive reuse and retrofit at scale. So projects that, for example, explore barriers and enablers to scaling up of retrofit of heritage buildings across different regions. Also intangible heritage, so researching the role of storytelling, public engagement, and heritage interpretation in communicating climate risks to different audiences. Landscape character under future climates, for example, projects that examine how projected climate scenarios might reshape the character of the historic landscape. Traditional knowledge for future adaptation, projects which explore traditional building or land management practices that offer climate resilient insights. Cultural heritage and managed retreat, projects that investigate the ethical, cultural and planning challenges of relocating or letting go of heritage in response to climate threats. And finally, within this broad theme, bio-based and regenerative materials in heritage contexts. So that's a kind of non-exhaustive list of possible subtopics within this broad theme of climate change and adaptation. The second equally broad priority research area is digital heritage, incorporating fair digital data. So for this broad theme, we're seeking proposals that explore innovative uses of AI, analytics, and digital twin technologies, and which advance fair practice, that's FAIR, in heritage contexts, and which also perhaps interrogate access, equity, and cultural dimensions of heritage data. So we're interested in projects that concern the vast amounts of digital material in the heritage sector, be that archaeological surveys, LiDAR scans, 3D models, archives, planning data, etc. The list goes on. We are, without clear frameworks, valuable records may be lost, siloed, or inaccessible. So that's one of the challenges we have in mind here. And these fair FAIR principles are framed here as the foundation or as a foundation of future heritage research. That is, that data ought to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. These principles ensure long-term value, transparency, and equity of access. And they also align heritage data with broader open science and digital governance agendas. As I think I've already said, we're especially interested in proposals that address digital twin and or AI technologies. I won't say too much about the latter, but digital twins are dynamic, data-rich models of heritage assets, so sites, buildings, or landscapes, and they enable simulation, monitoring, and public engagement. The opportunities of digital twin technologies are predictive maintenance, climate impact modeling, and immersive interpretation. The challenges, on the other hand, are sustainability, adhering to data standards, and also ownership. Finally, we're also interested particularly in proposals that address the social, the cultural, and the political dimensions of digital heritage. So who gets access, who is included or excluded, and what exactly does digital equity mean in heritage? That's it from me. Do feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Tom, thanks so much. Yes, please do get in touch if you have questions for Tom. Ben Thomas from Historic Environment Scotland.
Right, hi everyone, just getting the slides up. So hopefully you can see that. So anyone who doesn't know Historic Environment Scotland, we are the Scottish equivalent of both Historic England, so I've had a bit of my ground cleared there, and English Heritage. So we do everything that Historic England do, and we manage and run properties and their collections. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. A lot of this is already on the documents on the funding finder. So a bit like you've just heard, I was just going to go into a couple of examples of potential work within our priority areas. Again, these aren't an exhaustive list. We absolutely welcome conversation. So our first priority area is traditional materials and skills. You'll see the two big themes there about the sourcing and use of traditional building materials in Scotland, and the second being about the future of traditional skills. Just to give you a couple of case studies in this area, we've been working with a community group on the island of Ling, which is just south of Fort William. And we're looking there about trying to reopen an old slate quarry. The islands were kind of phrased, the islands that roofed the world, and slate from those islands were taken off roofed buildings across Scotland. But actually these days, that supply of traditional materials like Scottish slate has really dwindled. So how could we work with community groups or other businesses across Scotland to restart businesses that could improve the resilience or expand supply chains for the traditional materials? And just in terms of skills, we have a sector skills investment plan where we're looking at how we support the provision of traditional skills and other heritage related skills across the country. So how can we understand and improve the delivery and the viability of those skills? So that could be skills like thatching, displayed on the screen here, but also stonemasonry, traditional lead work, joinery, that kind of thing. So that was priority one. So we've got 4 rather than 2, so I kind of spread myself a little bit thinner. Heritage science, I mean, you've heard a lot of this from Historic England already. We're interested in very similar things. I think the retrofit of traditional buildings that Thomas has mentioned, that's an absolutely fundamental priority for us. We've been very lucky to get some investment from the Arts and Humanities Research Council in their Riches funding for a centre looking at the retrofit of traditional buildings. So people that are interested in that kind of thing, we're also very interested in that. The multiple crossovers with Historic England. So again, if you, as Andrea was saying, if you think there's a shared interest between us and Historic England, certainly we're very open to hearing from people that might want to work with us both. And actually, again, as Thomas was saying about Historic England, thinking through the way that digital tools can help to improve our productivity. So that could be across our work, that could be across visitor experience, exhibitions, interpretation, heritage conservation, heritage management, you name it. Our third priority is intangible cultural heritage in Scotland. So again, in terms of what Andrea was saying, kind of partnerships working is absolutely vital for us. We're part of a ICH Scotland partners group. We work with Creative Scotland, Museum Gallery Scotland, and Traditional Arts and Culture Scotland. And we work with Scottish Government, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and UNESCO UK. And we're thinking through, in light of the UK's ratification of a UNESCO Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage, how do we react to that, understand ICH in Scotland, and work to better support it? So again, just a couple of example areas there. Very interested in learning what other countries do, how we might kind of think about what people do, how we could react in Scotland, and very, very interested in understanding the ICH of new Scots communities. We really try to think about ICH in Scotland, not Scottish ICH, but we know that we could definitely improve our understanding, our knowledge, and our support for the ICH of different community groups. And fourth, again, you've heard a lot of this already, so lots and lots of shared overlaps and interest, and you'll hear climate change again, no doubt. Again, won't pick up on every single element. You've heard a lot of this already. We're very interested in very similar topics, embodied carbon in particular. The second one, though, I'd pick out there, maybe just as an example, Scope 3 emissions, if you've not heard of that before. That's the kind of third order effects of the work that you do as an organization. So that's, in our case, when we run our sites, the emissions and the environmental impact of our visitors. We are responsible for reporting on that to government. And because we're responsible for that, we have to try and find ways to reduce that. It'd be the same for a lot of public bodies. How do we think about those impacts, those emissions? We don't even necessarily know where they all are, let alone how we can start cutting them. So if you're interested in climate change, that kind of topic is really, really pressing across a lot of our organizations as IROs, understanding that and helping to address it. But again, you'll see many, many other themes there, including kind of climate risks, flooding, wildfires, and others. So that's a brief whirlwind to more details, obviously, on the funding finder. I thought I'd just kind of give you a sense, and you've heard a lot of this already from Andrea and Joe, so I'm just going to reiterate, I think, the first, and couldn't quite work out how to word that last bullet point, but I think that's really fundamental, that we really want practical impact from these projects. And that does mean there's definitely scope for people to put their shape on things, to choose how projects develop. But as a public body answerable to government, we do have kind of more rigidity, I think, in our priorities increasingly. So we definitely want people that can work with us and maybe be less blue sky in the research in service of practical impacts, whether that's for our organisation or for our sector. And everybody will reiterate to you, it does take us a long time. We're a big organisation, multiple teams, lots of different interests in your proposals and in your work, but that does mean we sometimes need to consult with multiple departments to be able to get back to you and then to work through developing a proposal. So please give us time. So yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a whirlwind tour, but absolutely delighted to be presenting and really looking forward to hopefully hearing from some of you in due course. Thanks.
Ben, thanks so much. And yeah, all of those practical points, really good salutary reminder for all of our organisations. I'm going to hand over for the last of these to Maria Castrillo from Imperial War Museums. Maria.
Thank you. Right, I'm just going to put that into presentation mode. Okay. I hope everybody can see my screen. Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Joe. So I'm just going to give a very quick overview about what Imperial War Museums are for those who might not be familiar with IWM. So IWM was founded in 1917 to collect the record of the First World War, and then after that, other wars and conflicts where Britain and the Commonwealth had been involved. So today we're a family of 5 museums, including IWM London in Lambeth Road, IWM Duxford in Cambridgeshire, HMS Belfast, Churchill Ballrooms, and IWM North in Manchester. Our collection is very large. It's really a multimedia collection that comprises over 33.5 million items and growing. We are constantly collecting material from the First World War up to the present and including most contemporary and 21st century conflicts. The museum actively has a very active public engagement program, as well as exhibitions and learning and engagement programs and community engagement. We are very much a social history museum. We are not a military history museum, and I would like to emphasize that for potential applicants. So you need to approach these themes more from a social history perspective. IWM is also an independent research organization, and we are also a collaborative doctoral partnership award holders. We have hosted one of these early career fellowships as part of the first round of this program. And our current ECR fellow is Dr. Anne-Marie Foster, who is working on a project called Accessible Past, Equitable Futures. So we already have experience of hosting a fellow, and we would love to host another one under this second round. In terms of priorities for IWM, so we have highlighted four. The first one is the Second World War centenary. So we're looking for projects or particular prioritized research that enables IWM to better understand and share the richness and global reach of our collection related to the Second World War ahead of the centenary in 14 years' time, and anticipating and shaping the level of public interest. So for this theme, we're looking to explore the relationship between history, memory, and identity, as well as how public perceptions of the conflict have evolved over time. Some of the research questions that we're interested in exploring are, for example, how does Second World War memory shift or morph between regional, national, and global levels? What are the resonant stories for today's generation? How do we connect the people of the past with the world 100 years on? We're also interested in expanding our research around diverse stories and polyvocality in museum exhibitions. The second priority theme for IWM is 21st century conflict representation in museums, collections, and displays. We're hoping to develop new galleries exploring the 21st century conflicts in the near future. And for this area, we're interested in projects that explore how the wars of the 21st century are represented in archive and museum collections as they are formed, displayed, and reformed. What are the trends that are currently emerging in this area? How is rapid reactionary collecting shaping or challenging museum and archival practice compared to more historic conflicts? Our third priority is AI and learning programs. Under this theme, we're interested in research projects that create the legal, ethical, and moral frameworks to empower the museum to use AI with its collections and the outputs that use these collections, such as, for example, learning programs. For this, we're interested, for example, in AI avatars. They offer transformative potential for connecting younger, non-traditional museum audiences with stories from within our collections and archives. But there are also critical concerns around bias replication, reinforcing dominant narratives, authenticity, and consent, leading to misrepresenting marginalized voices. AI is also a new tool, so we're asking ourselves the question: is this a benefit or a scourge for IWM? How is it used directly in the sector, and how is it used elsewhere? How do audiences' expectations impact museums' editorial choices when it comes to using AI as a tool? And our final priority is rethinking permanence in museum collections management. For this area, we're interested in projects that offer a critical examination of the tensions between the traditional museum ethos of permanence, where collections are preserved indefinitely for posterity, and more sustainable practices that meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. For this theme or area, we're looking at different research questions or projects that address different research questions, such as how can these principles be legally, morally, and ethically reconciled in contemporary collections management? And how can international heritage conventions, museum ethics codes, and environmental mandates converge to guide museums towards practices that are ecologically sound, socially responsible, and economically viable, ensuring that collections remain an asset rather than a liability for future generations? So these are, in a nutshell, our priorities. We would love to hear from potential applicants, and if you're interested in sending an expression of interest, please contact me. You can find my email address there, and also please put a copy in our research inbox. So either myself or my team will be, basically picking up all your inquiries, and so we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Maria, thank you very much indeed. We've got a few minutes for questions at this point before we take a brief comfort break. So can I ask if anyone has a question, either to raise a hand or type it into the chat? as I say, we will be sharing all of the information afterwards, and thanks colleagues for including your contact details so people can follow up afterwards. Any questions? No. Oh, yes, here we are. Right. So the first question, practical question, we initially thought this would be a good opportunity for ECR staff at UAL. Seems that if a staff member applies for it, this will require a variation of their contract while they work with the independent research organisations. May be complicated, have implications for things like pension, which we now think may make this quite difficult for current staff to apply. Can you advise on this at all? Andrea, is there anything that you would say on that? Sorry, that's a really tricky one to start with.
No, not off the top of my head. I think that would definitely be one that we'd need to have a discussion internally about. And I'm not even sure we are the right people to be able to answer that. I think that would mostly relate to the research organisations' requirements and employment policies, really.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I can say from so there are two things I would just say, and this is partly based on previous V&A experience rather than specific to this scheme. The first is that part-time, as Andrea said, is a possibility, and indeed some of the current fellows are part-time. The second thing is that some institutions, and as Andrea says, this is entirely dependent on the organisation's own policies, they may be able to offer a secondment, which secondment from a substantive university role, which would not affect pensions and so on. But yes, as Andrea says, that's a discussion to have with the individual organisation. And then that second question, I think, is also for you, Andrea. Could you please expand on how eligibility is determined based on funding history?
So I would say that relates to, have you had funding as an early career researcher to undertake a project over a substantial period of time? So, for example, have you previously been funded by AHRC to undertake another type of fellowship opportunity? So that's what we mean when we're talking about funding history. Have you received funding from another organisation at an early career stage where you've been able to develop your skills and leadership skills as part of that during that time frame? So I can't give you an exact time frame on that, just that it relates to whether you've been funded or not previously and how long of the period that was over and the purpose for that. So if you've led on a project before, you've had funding for it, then and it was for a substantial period of time, and you done a 2-year project somewhere else, then you're not likely to be eligible. So I think for those type of questions, might need to be considered on a case-by-case basis, because I think it would depend on what it was that you were funded for and how long it was.
Andrea, thank you very much indeed. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or raised hands at the moment, so I suggest that we take a quick comfort break for 5 minutes. So if we come back at very shortly after 4:30, and as I say, there'll be another chance for some questions after the next 3 short presentations. So if you have further questions that you think of during the break, please do just type them into the chat or save them for the end of the session. Many thanks, Andrea, Maria, Ben, and Tom for your contributions, and we will share all of those as PDFs with everyone after this event. Thank you. See you shortly. Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope there was enough time for a very brief comfort break. So we are going to hear now from one of our current fellows, Sean Parkinson, who is doing his early career research fellowship at Royal Botanic Gardens, Edinburgh. We thought it was important to give you a taster, anyone who's thinking about the scheme, give a taster of what it's been like to be a fellow. So Sean, over to you.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can share my screen. 1 second. Can you see this? Can you see yes or no? No?
No.
No. Ishk. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, it's really lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me to share my experience. And I'm going to try to be really, really brief with you. We've only got about 5 minutes, but just my name is Sean Parkinson. I am based at the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh. I'm coming towards the end of my fellowship. I'm an artist, musician and composer, and my particular attraction to the Botanics was their mixture of collections, the herbarium, sorry, their living collections and their libraries and archives. And my project was exploring how can we use smell to better identify and describe mushrooms. What can mushroom illustrations, descriptions of fungal odours and material traces in natural history books tell us about past smells? And how can artists, via practice research, help enrich our multi-sensory understanding of plants and fungi through research in botanical mycological collections and herbaria? So basically, I'm exploring the smell of mushrooms, how they've been described historically, but also via empirical research, going out into the field and trying to smell these things for myself. But that also entails partnership working. And one of the partners that I listed in my application was the KB library in The Hague that contained this first edition copy of a very important book in the history of mycology called The Description of the Phallus. And it was my project was about going to see and smell this book, but also to kind of help translate it for the first time from Neo-Latin into English, which then formed part of a publication, which I'll get to at the end. But as an artist, it was also about embodying these sensory descriptions. And one of the wonderful things about the Botanics in Edinburgh is that it has a gallery. So being able to reach audiences with my research to try and find non-textual ways of reaching audiences, which I'll talk about very briefly. But that work also took me into the field, identifying fungi, collecting it, and accessioning it, so that is now part of the Botanics Fungarium collection of British fungi. And part of my role was to describe the sensory aspects of this mushroom, but also to work with a fragrance designer to test other forms of human-centered ways of knowing the more than human world. And I'm going to try to really whiz through this, but the aim was to explore and communicate the olfactory heritage of mushrooms using creative and interdisciplinary methodologies to investigate their cultural and historical significance. I suppose the point I want to make here is that as an artist being placed within a predominantly science-based institution, it's interesting to be intimate with the collection and to see what types of research methods and methodologies, what they can reveal when we are proximate to collections. It's something of the scheme that I think is really valuable. And the objective is to analyse historical texts, illustrations, material traces in botanical libraries and herbaria to uncover these past perceptions of fungal odours. So it's about being close to the collections, about trying to find aspects of what books and other areas can reveal that actually you might not be able to get from traditional forms of study. Another objective to develop innovative tools and engagement activities to enhance multisensory understanding of fungi and contribute to Botanic's Plant Humanities Initiative, which my colleague Lorna Mitchell may talk to you about. I'm actually going to whiz through this because there are a bunch of outputs that I described in my application that I've achieved, and actually having somebody, a line manager who holds you to that task, has been really useful to think about the commitment to the project, but also in your development as a researcher. And some of the accidents that have happened as a result of that is to be able to test different forms, different methods, rather as public outputs, I suppose, but as kind of iterative cycles of we're proposing something publicly, we're taking risks publicly, and actually inviting people into from the sector in order to refine some of those methods. I'm going to just talk to you one last thing about going out and what it means to kind of sniff these things in the field, and actually a comparative analysis, which is one is human-based, nose-led, and another which is about taking these fungi, which is another named partner, which was the University College London Heritage Laboratory. So working with heritage scientists to analyse the odour of this stinkhorn mushroom, really important in the history of mycology, and to compare these different methods to see which one actually gets closer to the real thing, but also is an expression of a fungal smell, which is important in 500 years of people writing about the smells of mushrooms. And this just is, I'm showing you here also the importance of documentation, visual documentation, and telling stories about what we do when we're in these institutions, but how sometimes it gets revealed in, as I said, non-textual ways on people's faces. At the culmination of a lot of this work, which was kind of front-loaded, I'm now in the final stages of putting together an olfactory toolkit, which is going to be shared with 7 cultural and heritage institutions that I've been working with, including Kew, and the Botanics, as well as National Museums Scotland and elsewhere. But it's the publication of this book, which actually being inside the Botanics and all of their resources has managed to really facilitate that process and make it happen much faster. This is the last slide promise. But I suppose one of the things to talk about is the opportunities, about making unusual connections via this pilot scheme, demonstrating impact. There's mechanisms within these organisations to help market, but also to help trace and track where this impact might happen, even in the short term, and a way of building sustainability, securing future funding and developing one's leadership in arts and humanities research. I will end it there. Thank you very much.
Sean, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Really, really helpful. I'm going to move on to our final 2 quick presentations. So first of all, Isabel Davis from the Natural History Museum, and then Helen Mears from Royal Museums Greenwich. Isabel.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry that I don't have a beautiful slide presentation, but I'm going to compile one based on what I now say to you, and so that we can circulate that both to you, but also to people who couldn't make it here today. So my name is Isabel Davis. I'm based at the Natural History Museum, where I lead one of 9 research themes, and my research theme is called Collections and Culture, which is code for arts and humanities research. So it will be me, a human being, responding to your emails about your interest in working at the Natural History Museum. So lots of people here will know about the Natural History Museum, but I think it's perhaps not so well known that we not only do research, but we actually have arts and humanities research. Obviously, traditionally, this is an institution that has been a scientific institution. We're well known for being a top visitor attraction, but it's perhaps, people perhaps don't quite realise the extent of our collection. So we have 80 million specimens, and we also have library and archives, and we also have laboratories. So I've put the links about those in the documentation which has gone out through the scheme. And, you know, really they're coming to somewhere like the NHM is a chance to really be part of a pioneering study of how these kinds of collections, which have, as I say, traditionally faced the sciences, can be used for arts and humanities disciplines, but also how we can bring arts and humanities disciplines into the kind of shared project of addressing the planetary emergencies that we face. So the NHM's vision at the moment is to create advocates for the planet. So my job description is literally to create advocates for the planet by transforming the study of natural history. And if you apply and are successful in this fellowship scheme, that would be your job description too. And it's obviously a great privilege to be able to work on something like that. So some of my colleagues who've been giving their presentations have been talking particularly about climate change. And of course, we do have climate scientists, but we tend to think more in our institution about biodiversity change and particularly biodiversity loss, and that the kind of specimen collections can particularly speak to numbers of species, loss of species, numbers within species. And so we're all about kind of prioritizing the environment. There is a slight kind of preference, if you like, for thinking about biodiversity in different ways. But I guess the idea of my theme and the idea of conducting arts and humanities research in these collections is to try now to dissolve the kind of completely fallacious division between nature and culture, and to think about these things together, that actually we need all the disciplines to work together and have a kind of 360-degree disciplinary approach. So I've singled out 4 priority areas, and I'll just say a few things about those in this very short presentation. So I've put, first of all, like, you must have an interest in the visual and material cultures of natural history, and I think that's really crucial. You know, it's so for example, if you were to propose something about the idea of extinction, you know, that's fine, that's a really interesting area, but you then need to think how you're going to connect it to something within our collections or within the work that we do. So, for example, looking at some of the actual specimens of extinct animals that we have. And one of the key ways to do that, if you're not that familiar with natural history collections, would be to go into the galleries. That's the window, if you like, onto the collections. And then, you know, perhaps even as you're working on your application, to come in and look at the collections behind the scenes in the area that you're interested in. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to have extensive experience of that, but really just, you know, as you're working on the application, to come in and do your best to get up to speed on what a natural history specimen looks like. Colonial histories and legacies, I've put as a priority area, and this is the thing that I'm asked about most when I go out to speak about our collections. You know, and it's a really interesting kind of problem and question which we need lots more information about. Of course, curators have all sorts of hunches about where things have come from, who brought it here, and how we acquired it. But that's different from putting it into a really kind of considered historical perspective. And so the key question for us is that thing about future sustainability and advocacy for the future. Like, how do we use collections which have been part of the problem, that have come from that have histories associated with them, which have caused which have had kind of environmental impacts, and have been part of the kind of colonial legacy of social inequality. So how do we use those now to create equitable, sustainable futures? And so that's the key question. And I would say quite a large number of the projects that we support here are in that vein, including the project that we had in the first round of these, which is about colonial commercial whaling and how our collections relate to that commercial activity. The The third priority I've put down is about the digital humanities, and the NHM is leading a £150 million project to digitise the whole of the UK's natural science collections. And so that's obviously a really huge kind of investment of money in our cultural and natural heritage. But the question is how we humanise that data, how we enable people to understand what that is, how they can use it for their for themselves, you know, and how we try to think about bringing arts and humanities perspectives to that enterprise. And so creative approaches to digital humanities and also AI, which has been mentioned by my colleagues. And the last priority area we put down, which intersects with these others, is about marginalized perspectives. So that might be thinking about how people who have been perhaps overlooked but important in previous science networks, so Indigenous perspectives, amateur collectors, female collectors and scientists, minoritized ethnicities, and thinking about how we bring in kind of completely different perspectives. And so that might be thinking about doing some quite participatory work in relation to our collections. So that's a really kind of quick whiz through. I'm going to sort of put it down in a more detailed way as a deck of slides so that can be shared. But I'm hoping that you can see that I'm a human being. I will be very interested to see the proposals that people come up with. It doesn't, you know, our priority list is not exhaustive, and it may be that you've thought of something that we haven't. So I would say try us. I think
Isabel,
I'll leave it there.
thanks. I am going to go straight on to Helen so that we can make sure that we do have a few minutes for any final Q&As at the end. So Helen Mears from Royal Museums Greenwich.
Thank you, Jo. I'm hoping I'm sharing my screen. Sorry, I'm going to have to do that again. I'm Helen Mears. I'm Head of Curatorship and Research from Royal Museums Greenwich. And I will go as quickly as I can because I'm sure everyone's keen to have some time for questions. But thank you for allowing me this opportunity to pitch to potential fellows for thinking about Royal Museums Greenwich as a possible host organisation for your ECR fellowship. So Royal Museums Greenwich, who are we? These are our sites, the National Maritime Museum, a free national museum which explores the impact and legacies of British maritime endeavours. We've got galleries dedicated to Nelson Navy Nation, as well as Atlantic Worlds and Pacific Encounters, amongst others. Also the Queen's House in the centre of the image on the right, a unique 17th century neoclassical building which serves as a stunning setting for changing displays from our fine art collection, both historic and contemporary. The Royal Observatory, the home of GMT, and a place to explore the histories of timekeeping, navigation and astronomy, and also the Cutty Sark, whose masts are just visible here, a 19th century record-breaking tea clipper. We also have extensive research resources, the Caird Library and Archive, which is at the museum, which is the world's largest maritime library and archive collection. The Prince Philip Maritime Collection Centre, just down the road from us in Greenwich and Kidbrooke, a state-of-the-art centre for collections care and conservation, and the Brass Foundry, a collection storage and research centre which cares for RMG's extensive holdings of ship plans and historic photographs. All of our sites and offer are united by a strong sense of social purpose. This is a visualization of our content strategy, charting our course, which is about ensuring relevance and a sense of belonging for our audiences and publics. And this factor is really important through our research activities, including through our commitments to widen our research communities and to build research capacity outside formal institutions. So like other organisations that you've been hearing about, we've also set some research priorities for this scheme. These are ours: British Caribbean maritime connections, the democratisation of astronomy in the late 19th, early 20th century, research which strengthens our ability to support community-led research practice and which illuminates the value of digital technologies to promoting collections access and engagement. And very quickly, we'll scamper through these. British Caribbean maritime connections. Of course, there are lots of ways in which RMG's collections speak to these connections, whether through histories of transatlantic trade and African resistance, to shipping lines which service Britain and the Caribbean in terms of post and the export of commodities. And as it notes here, we're particularly interested in research which helps strengthen our ability to meaningfully engage with Windrush 80 in 2028. The democratisation of astronomy. Obviously, we're keen to support research which explores how female and non-professional astronomers were able to participate in astronomical communities of knowledge in this period. This is especially important for us as we're undertaking a major redevelopment of the Royal Observatory, and we're really keen to expand our narratives around scientific innovation ahead of when we reopen in 2028. And some broader themes around supporting community-led research practice. We're really keen to promote equitable access to cultural heritage for research and to build capacity in researchers from non-traditional backgrounds. So we really welcome research propositions in this area. And lastly, digital technologies. Like our fellow organisations, we know that there's so much more that digital technologies can do in terms of promoting collections access and engagement. And we welcome research which develops our capacity to manage and curate digital collections, also research which engages with digital humanities tools and methods. So if you've got a project idea, we really welcome the opportunity to discuss it with you before the 10th of December. Ideally, if you could send us a summary of your interest, ideally by about mid-November would be great. And if viable and it meets our kind of priority areas of interest, we'd be really glad to have a chat with you about that. Thanks very much. Thanks, Joe.
Helen, thank you so much for that rapid whiz through your priorities and for the slides that we'll share. We have 6 minutes remaining in our allotted time for any further questions. So and I can see that there's one. Sean, thank you so much for answering the question about outputs. Absolutely, talk to your potential host about that, and they will be able to advise and work with you to develop them. There's a question about finding a list of current previous fellowship projects to get a wider sense of what types of projects people have done. If you go to the early career, thank you Eloise, research fellowships research project page, that gives you the list of current fellows and their hosts, and you may be able to, there may be other information if you Google those names and organisations. There may be institutions, further details on those institutions' own websites as well. Are there any other questions at this point? No, I'm going to leave it a minute just to see if anyone has anything else. Right, what the employed status of the individual applying should be. So Andrea's gone, but Sue Carver from AHRC is also here. Sue, is that a question that you would be able to respond about? What should the employed status of the individual applying should be? For instance, I'm on a short-term contract.
Yeah, so researchers who are not currently in employment, so I'm just reading from the funding finder, not currently in employment are welcome to apply, providing the host IRO commits to employ them for the duration of the fellowship if the application is successful. So they don't have to be currently employed, but the IRO, if they're successful, would need to commit to actually supporting them during the fellowship.
Thanks, Sue. Glad that answered the question. any further questions? As I said earlier on, but just for to reiterate and for anyone who missed it, we will put together a Q&A document to upload to the funding finder in which we can capture the main questions that are coming up through these town hall events. You'll also find on the funding finder the contact details for who to contact if you have questions about the scheme. So for institution-specific questions, do go to the institution directly. You've got the contact details, or you will have the contact details of colleagues who've presented today, and the wider document that's on the funding finder for all the organisations that are participating. There's the contact details for us at the V&A as the cohort coordination and development team. And then there are the contact details for the AHRC if you have questions, particularly about the things like eligibility, for example. Thank you very much. That's a very nice comment to have in the chat. I hope that this has been useful. And I think if there aren't any further questions, we should probably draw it to a close. So can I thank all of our colleagues for speaking, Isabel, Tom, Sean, Ben, Helen, Maria, Andrea in absentia, and Sue and Eloise for organising it. And thank you all very much for for listening and for participating in this and for your questions. And please do get in touch if you would like to find out more.